Welcome to episode 18 of Successful Demo. In each episode, we analyze the theoretical and practical aspects of one more newly released cards. Today, we'll be looking at calibration testing, or Cali testing for short, in homage to what was one of the best netrunner testing groups of all time. Today, we'll be playing it in Arthur group, in HB, not in NBN as you might expect. And that's mostly because, well, it'll be a bit of a waste if we don't try it out in Arthur group, right? I mean, I talked about the synergy in the Arthur group successful demo episode, and it would be a shame if I did not actually give it a go and show it off to you all to see what it can do. So this is the deck that I've come up with. It is kind of like I forgot what's the name of the HB deck, the one that ran a very little ice and played a bunch of lateral growth and advanced assembly lines. Basically, it's a forward tempo deck that just capitalizes on forward momentum to keep pushing you forward every turn of the game. You have a lot of click compression cards at your disposal, most of them HB for obvious reasons. Whether you are installing cards in remotes, whether you're scoring agendas, or whether you're taking triple actions and proccing Jeeves, you're going to get click compression everywhere, and this will help you gain the tempo advantage over the runner, which is pretty important because runners nowadays typically have a lot more momentum slash tempo than you, considering they have all the nifty cards like Tapworm, Beth, and Haley to, generate them extra clicks. It's nice that the corp can be on par with that as well. We also run lots of tiny money. This is a very notable characteristic of the deck. Even though I'm not personally a fan of lateral growth, it is a very low value card, giving you only 2 credits and saving a click on the install, but it is much more preferable than the alternative, which is IPO. Not only is IPO and a terminal, it basically forces you to click for a bunch of credits before you can get the 8 credit threshold to play it. And you really don't want to be clicking for credits with this deck, as you can see. With this many money cards in your deck, you shouldn't be clicking for credits at all. You should just be relying on your forward tempo and the many money cards in your deck to carry you forward. And if you ever do score a corporate sales team with this deck, well, that's enough money for the rest of the game. Your clicks should be spent clicking for draw. Clicking for draw to get you these advanced assembly lines and lateral growths that will propel you forward. Clicking to draw those agendas that you will score soon. And to combine all of that, we have a somewhat asset spammy deck. We don't have a lot of assets, but trust me, when you install them with one ice protecting all of them, it can look like an asset spam based deck pretty quickly. And as we all know, in an asset spam deck, the runner can't check them all, especially when they're iced up thanks to Arthur Group's ability. So with that, you can easily sneak agendas out on the board, and this will give you leverage to score your agendas should they not check them, because they might be Jeeves or Cali testings that score your future agendas. Now, the scoring plan is pretty interesting because we actually give ourselves a bit of leeway. You can do the typical 2+2+3, where the final 3 is an Ikawa project. You get the benefit of it being protected by Fetch Out 3/Turing, meaning that the runner actually has to break these ice. If they click through it, they won't have the click remaining to steal the Ikawa. It is also never advanceable. If you can't find a scoring window to advance it against the runner, well, never mind. As long as you have 2 FA cards, fast advance cards at your disposal, choose among Cali testing, Biotic Labor, and Jeeves, you can score the 5-3 as well. If that proves a bit too difficult, you can instead go for the 2+2+2+1 plan, where the 1 comes from the one-off Clones Are Not People in your deck. Play the Clones Are Not People after triple advancing your Vitruvius, and that's game for you. This can be easily done if you're able to sneak out the Vitruvius on the table the turn before, along with one other fast advance card, be it Jeeves Model Baroids or a Cali testing. So, well, we'll see if we can make magic happen. Our opponent today is Mud, who never fails to bring thrilling games to the table whenever we face off against each other. I'm keeping my opening hand here because it has a lot of good cards. It has draw in Daily Business Show, it has money in advanced assembly lines, and it has at least 1 piece of ice, which allows me to start doing remote shenanigans. So protect R&D, protect remote, and I'll leave HQ open because there are no agendas in here. My opponent reveals Magnum Opus, and we proceed to use both the money card and the draw card. On my opponent's end of turn, I res the advanced assembly lines and use it to install a Daily Business Show, which then gets its trigger. This allows me to bury the agenda that I don't want to score just yet, and allows me to play Ultraviolet Clearance, allowing me to draw into my agenda, which I can then install, and then freely install the ice to protect the agenda on turn 2. This is what you can do with Asa. This is shenanigans at its finest. You get Daily Business Show set up, you protect it, you protect your R&D, and you get a protected agenda ready to score by turn 3. Only in Asa can you get this much click compression. Alright, so my opponent is forced to trash a Daily Business Show here. My opponent knows the power of it, allowing me to bury agendas is probably a bad thing. Now here I'll usually score the Vitruvius, but that will put me on 1 credit, and I don't want to go to 1 credit with a hedge fund in my hand. Knowing that my opponent doesn't have a paperclip in their bin, I know that my Vitruvius should be safe for a while behind the vanilla. So instead I distract my opponent by double installing in server 1. This looks like an agenda on top of a Cali grid. Sorry, Cali testing. Like something like a corporate sales team on Cali testing, but that's not the case. I actually just installed those 2 cards there because they were the 2 most freely available cards in my hand. With the special bonus that if my opponent doesn't run it, I can use the advanced assembly lines in there to install team sponsorship and then score my Vitruvius to recur something. In this case, my opponent does stim hack my remote, so I won't get the advanced assembly lines into team spawn off, but I managed to waste a stim hack from my opponent, waste a run through the Fairchild 3, only for them to trash a Cali testing. Not the biggest loss for me because it doesn't give them agenda points. Now once again, I delay scoring the Vitruvius here because I think my opponent has absolutely no intention of contesting the remote at all, given that they went for my Fairchild over server 2. So here I'm just going to install 2 team sponsorships, one behind the Fairchild 3 and the other out naked. This is always a win-win for me. Either my opponent trashes them, they trash one of them, which is a loss for their tempo, or they don't trash it and they concede a lot of tempo to me when I do score the Vitruvius. Now I want you to think about this. I'm going to score this Vitruvius here with 1 res team sponsorship. I'm looking in my bin now. What should I install using the team sponsorship trigger? Pause the video and have a think. Now the answer to this question is typically you can't go wrong no matter what you choose because there's so many good targets. If you want money, you can go for advanced lines. If you want card filtering, you can go for business show. And if you want fast advance, you can go for Cali testing. But I think considering the current board state, there is a very clear solution that is head and shoulders above the rest, and that is the daily business show, which is what you see me go for here. The reason is simple. Compared to the money option, daily business show gives you a lot more long-term payoff because daily business show allows you to draw your money cards all the much faster, which more than makes up for the loss of money that you otherwise get from installing advanced lines. As for Cali testing, you'll notice that my board state isn't exactly set up to take full advantage of it. My opponent can easily run through the vanilla and trash it for only 2 credits. Daily business show, on the other hand, gives me a lot more longevity, which I need to compete against my opponent's magnum opus economy. And if they run to trash it, they have to pay more money than the Cali testing, which works out in my favor anyway. Here I want to bring to your attention how I'm spending my clicks. I spend this turn, click 1 draw, click 2 draw, click 3 install teams, my 3rd team sponsorship behind Architect. You'll notice that even though I'm only on a measly 7 credits, I can still afford to spend my clicks to draw in a situation where most other people would click for credits. This is because the deck lends itself so well to click for draw, and I'm rewarded for that because with my Punishing Ice, I'm able to get an Architect fire off. Now, if you let this version of HB ever get an Architect fire off, you are probably screwed. I was able to get so much mileage out of this Architect. I installed G's from R&D, triggered Asa to install another Ice from my hand on top of it, and then triggered the second Architect subroutine to install an advanced assembly lines from my bin to give me money. Now my opponent thinks this is an agenda and attempts to run it on second click. Now I don't have enough money to res that Ice there, but with advanced assembly lines, I now can. So I'm going to res the advanced assembly lines to res the Turing, which keeps my opponent out here. They don't have Black Orchestra in the bin, and it's too expensive anyway because they need 9 credits, 3 to install, 6 to pump. While I do lose the card in my hand to Hacktivist, it was worth it, as it really distracts my opponent, makes them lose clicks, and very importantly, makes the item behind the Turing look like an agenda. Because I was desperate enough to res the lines, the advanced lines, just to get the Turing res. This might mean that it's an agenda there. I might be able to bait my opponent into running it. They did not. Instead, they tried to attack my daily business show, which failed because I have vanilla there. They wouldn't have enough money to break through the server, install the paperclip, and trash the business show. They think they can get into R&D while I'm only on 4 credits. They are wrong! Fairchild 2 comes to save my day. They are forced to click, lose cred, which really works in my favor considering that, well, they only get single access. So I'm in a very good spot here, but now I'm down to 0 credits, so, well, obviously you click for credits here. Even though I said I'm not supposed to click for credits, well, my opponent tried to make me poor, and they did. But they're not getting their Beth triggers at all, and I'm keeping them out. My daily business show is still up, my Jeeves is still there, my double team sponsorship is waiting to be fired, and R&D is safe. They can't get agendas because there are none in HQ. Daily business show is up. Again, this is how important daily business show is. I draw into Jeeves and hedge fund here, and obviously I need the money, so hedge fund gets played and kept. Now, before we continue on with the video, can I just take a moment to stop and appreciate how amazing my board state is? It is turn 9, and typically by this time, most runner decks who have had their breakers set up, the economy engine rolling, and are now starting to pressure centrals. What's my opponent doing? They haven't installed breakers yet, and it's not their fault. They have been playing well. They have been trying to target down my remotes because there could very well be agendas that I'm sneaking out, and they cannot afford to let me get an agenda out because I gain so much forward momentum with those team sponsorships on the table. Unfortunately for my opponent, they have been bonking into the wrong ice at the wrong time. The Architect Fire really cost them a lot. It basically allowed me to start asset spamming. How often do you see a corp with 4 assets on the table, each protected by a single ice? Isn't that amazing? And this is something I really love about this deck. Because most of your ice is cheap ice, 4 or less to res. It basically means that the runner has to be threatened as long as they have at least 4 credits, and especially 6 because of Fairchild 3. And it makes all your assets kind of impenetrable, just like Gagarin does, IG does, except worse because unlike Gagarin, it probably costs more than 1 credit to break the ice to get to your assets. So yeah, all this click compression sets up your amazing board state where your ice protects your assets and your assets help you win the game. Speaking of winning the game, let's get back to the board where my opponent decides, of all things, to run my Turing. Remember what I said earlier on how the item behind the Turing looked like an agenda because I was so desperate to res an advanced assembly lines, getting a hacktivist trigger on me, just to res an ice that only ends the run? Well, it really did work. My opponent ran it only to find the Jeeves in the remote, which they then begrudgingly trashed because they knew that it would help me score my big agendas if left uncontested. So they do deny me part of my win con, but at the same time they emptied the Turing remote, which as you see from the video, allowed me to then install an Ikawa project into the remote and further fortify it with more ice. I'm now able to reuse the Turing that was protecting the Jeeves for better things like scoring an agenda. But of course, because the Jeeves is gone and because I don't have any fast advanced mechanisms, I have to wait for a bit before scoring this agenda. Well, screw it, I'm going to go for it now. My opponent gave me a perfect scoring window to do so. They spent the last turn dropping Turning Wheel and Ormaquah, which left them too poor to contest my remote. This gives me a perfect chance to basically score this Ikawa uncontested. I knew they wouldn't be able to get in because they would have to break the Fairchild 3 and the Turing. They can't click through either because if they do, they'll access with 0 clicks. They can't steal the Ikawa. And we've actually played this matchup earlier. My opponent knows that I run Ikawa, so they know that they have basically no chance of contesting this. Given that I have 6 credits to rest the Fairchild 3 and 3 remaining perfectly to score the Ikawa, there was very little my opponent could do there. So instead, they ran my centrals a bunch to get Ormaquah counters, Turning Wheel counters, while I scored my big 3-pointer agenda. That's huge. Whenever you can score the 3-pointer, you are in very good shape. Now, there's a lot going on right here, so I'm going to pause the video once again. When my opponent ended their turn, I knew that I was going to be able to score this Ikawa. However, I had 1 unres team sponsorship on the board, which I then res before I took my mandatory draw. I was willing to lose either of the ice in my hand. However, if I drew something valuable off the top of R&D, I would not want to have it instantly trashed by Hacktivist meeting. So this is why I raised the team sponsorship before my turn began. Now I'm going to score the Ikawa here. The question is, what do I install with my double team sponsorships? And what do I keep with my daily business show trigger, which drew me into Project Vitruvius and Cali testing? This is a tough question. There are lots of variables involved. I'm going to show you my archives as well. Take a moment to think about it. Pause the video if you need the time. Now once again, while this question seems very open-ended, I think there is a very obvious line of play. Our opponent is very far behind and we are very far ahead. We are at match point, they don't have a single agenda. We can definitely afford to keep the Vitruvius and aim to install it on the team sponsorship trigger. The real question is, what do we install on the second team sponsorship trigger? And the answer is pretty obvious as well, because by logical deduction, if we want to protect the Vitruvius, we need to rest the Fairchild 3 on the thick remote. That would cost 6 credits and we only have 5. So the obvious answer is we need to install advanced assembly lines in the new remote. And since we get an Arthur trigger, I might as well get the Fairchild 1 out of my hand. So now we have 5 assets protected by 1 ice each. Well, one of them's not an asset, it's the Project Vitruvius that will win me the game, protected by a Fairchild 3 into Turing. My opponent had to gamble that neither of those were genders. After all, what were the chances? They had to continue setting up, they needed money from Magnum Opus, and they needed their Armor Qua at 5 strength. So they ran my centrals a bunch and aimed to lock my remotes, but they were 1 turn too late. With the click efficiency, or rather click compression generated by Arthur Group and friends, we are able to close out the game right under our opponent's noses. Make no mistake, my opponent played a very good game despite losing 0-7. They asserted the right amount of pressure on my remotes, but unfortunately decided not to run every single time I installed an agenda in a remote, which was really unfortunate for my opponent. It just goes to show you how powerful Arthur Group is when you perform this sort of strategy where you install lots of assets each protected by a single ice. I mean, you can do that with any other HB identity as well, but if you just look at the game stats, well, they tell everything. Arthur triggered 6 times this game, that's 6 save clicks. 2 whole court turns ahead of time. Imagine if I gave my opponent 2 more turns to click Magnum Opens. The game outcome would have been so different. The team sponsorship definitely helped out as well, allowing me to save 3 clicks on installing cards. And not just click save. It allowed me to get Arthur triggers off the team sponsorship. It allowed me to install from the bin, which means that I don't have to spend a click drawing up to see more assets to install with team sponsorship. I can simply recur stuff from the bin. So these two in combination are very, very powerful. And you know, they either fired off, which gave me extra tempo, or they cost my opponent a lot of tempo to go and trash. They all worked out nicely, and that's the magic of Arthur Group. Wait a minute, why is the background purple? Isn't this supposed to be a successful demo of Cali testing? Yeah, except that we didn't really get to calibrate this game. We didn't fire calibration testing once. Well, the only time I saw Cali testing this game was on the early double install with Arthur Group, and my opponent stim hacked through it and trashed the Cali testing. Never to hear of it ever again from that point on. Still though, I can show you some footage from other games where I tested with Cali testing. For one, it allows you to score, do some really interesting 5-3 scoring shenanigans. Take this game for example. This was a last click run on my Ikawa project, and my opponent had no clicks remaining, so they couldn't steal the Ikawa project. But the fun thing was, because I had 2 Cali testings on that server, I could then score the agenda next turn to win. But as long as I made sure to fire off those Cali testings before they access, otherwise they would trash the Cali testings and I wouldn't get my advancement. So yeah, very interesting way to get 5-3 agendas out. Instead of advancing and telegraphing them, you just put a bunch of stuff in the remote. They have to guess whether it's an Ikawa project or just a bunch of upgrades. Now the question sticking out like a sore thumb, I can hear it coming all the way from here. Why aren't you playing Cali testing in NBN? In fact, I did. If you remember one of my earlier live streams, I actually showcased a New Angela Saw deck with this card along with Echo Chamber. The problem is, when I tried to play it again for this successful demo, I never could find a good game with it because it just kept flopping. I kept asking myself why. Partially due to my bad play, but which I won't go into, but more importantly, I find that New Angela Soul is simply too poor without Breakaway Grid. You're clicking for credits most of the time, and as I mentioned in this video, if you're clicking for credits and not going fast, you're doing something wrong, because in the late game, it's going to be very difficult. Cali Testing is a card that you really want to use to, you know, generate forward momentum. It's kind of like Fast Advance Astro Biotics back in the day, where you want to score agendas early and fast, not even though they take away tempo from you, because you want to get those points on the board, and also because you don't have to spend that many resources scoring. That's not the case with Cali Testing in New Angela Soul. For one, there are very few agendas that you really want to score in a typical NBN deck. I mean, if you think of defending your defensive agendas like Quantum Predictive Model, do you really want to score that one pointer off a Cali Testing? I didn't think so. Global Foods are also hard to score as well with Cali Testing. Compare that to an NBN deck where you have a much wider array of tools to help you score those big 5-3s. You have G's Model Bioroids, you have Biotic Labels, so there are a lot more outs than with NBN Soul decks. And yeah, the fact that you cannot go very horizontal like HB can is a problem in New Angela Soul, because you do become that much more susceptible to remote camping. Here's a game I'll showcase that illustrates that. You've seen the remote there. There's a Cali Testing in the remote that I installed 2 whole turns ago. It's turn 15 of the game, and I still haven't found a correct agenda to score off that Cali Testing. Just goes to show you, it's like, yeah, you have the Cali testing ready, you have a pretty well defended remote server, but you're just not drawing the agenda that will go well with Cali Testing, because there's so few of them in your deck. And as a result, my opponent simply said, well, I'm just going to ignore your remote and attack your R&D for the win anyway. At the end of the day, if you're trying to score 7 agenda points by advancing your agendas, let's face it, HB has much better economy, much better draw, much better click compression, much better win cons, much better ice. There's no reason to play Cali Testing in NBN, because such a deck would attempt to score agendas by advancing them, and you are much better off doing that in HB. The real question is whether you should play Cali Testing over Biotic Labels in HB. I ran 1 copy of Biotic Label and 3 Cali Testings in my Arthur deck. Well, they have their pros and cons. I can't accurately evaluate them. I'll just give a list of strengths and weaknesses for you to decide on. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and happy net running. See you next time.